Welcome to the Seahawkers podcast with your hosts, Adam Emmert.
Pay somebody in the trenches like that. Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
And Brandon Schultz.
When you drink the Fantberry Kool-Aid, you can't just spit it back out.
Go Hawks!
This is episode 193 of the Seahawkers podcast. I'm Brandon Schultz of the Military Seahawkers, joined, as always, by my good buddy, Montana Seahawker Adam Emmert.
Brandon, what was it, 4 or 5 years ago when we started doing this nonsense? I wondered how many episodes it would take until we literally ran out of things to talk about. Now I know the answer. It's 193.
That's how many it takes.
That's how many it takes.
This week was one of those weeks where we look at out at the news landscape for the Seahawks, and not a lot going on.
No. The most interesting thing was a headline that read something like, Earl Thomas could be swept up in a trade tsunami.
I bet that terrified you, because I know how you hate tsunamis.
The thing that scares me the second most in all the world is tsunamis.
Number one, snakes.
The number one, snakes. And the third is hipsters. But definitely tsunamis.
Hipsters scare you?
Yeah, they're like zombies, dude. They could take over the world at any second. Like, everybody's infected. They start wearing skinny jeans and they start writing poetry in a coffee shop, and like it's over for mankind.
The skinny jeans slow them down, though. You can easily, like a zombie, you can easily outrun them, unless they're like the zombies from, what was that zombie movie where they're super fast?
Oh, I don't know. There were super fast zombies?
Yeah.
No, that can't be. No.
The one where they only come out at night and they're super fast.
That's not cool. I don't watch any of those. I don't do horror movies.
Yeah.
No, trade tsunami was terrifying. I'm not sure what that is. And that's how you know it's been a slow week, is when there are made up terms that are now the news. So thanks, Greg Rosenthal, for the trade tsunami. Now, my question is there a trade earthquake before the trade tsunami that's about to go down? Like, are there precursors or the things that we should be looking for? Is there any way we can get all of our guys to high ground so that they don't get swept up in the trade tsunami?
Well, we may or may not get into that, but we will talk about Seahawks and how they should approach free agency this week versus addressing some of their needs versus the draft. And with free agency coming up, I want to talk a little bit more about the Seahawks' top free agents. I want to talk a little bit about compensatory picks and how those work, because it could play a role in how the Seahawks approach free agency this year. They didn't have any big names really apart from Steven Hauschka leave last year, but this year they could have some pretty big free agents among the pool of
Correct.
The free agent market. So we can talk about that. And one thing, apart from the trade tsunami that was in the news this last week, Russell Wilson trade possibilities. Yeah.
What would you take for Russell Wilson in a trade must be answered with another question. That's what I know.
It brings up a lot of questions for me.
Yeah. There's really only one question for me.
Okay. Well, we'll get into it. And I know Daniel Jeremiah put it out on Twitter and got some interesting responses. And of course, we'll get into some do better and better at life this week. Yeah.
It's going to be a very short show. We're going to get into some other riveting topics like, how's your mom? Like, how's she doing? how's Glenda doing?
Yeah. How's your mom?
Yeah. Momming.
Yeah.
Doing mom things.
Well, Adam, one person we're going to ask about how your mom's doing is Corbin Smith of the Legion of 12 radio podcast and the Seahawks Wire. He'll be coming on later on the show. Let's go ahead and kick things off with some talk about free agency. The free agency period is coming up after the NFL Combine. It's really the first opportunity the teams have to address some of their needs is through free agency, because otherwise you're waiting until the draft. And how the Seahawks are even able to approach free agency this year could have a lot to do with the salary cap. I know we've talked about in the past that the salary cap is purely artificial, if it's even really there. But I think for the sake of argument this week, we need to at least pretend there's a salary cap and that it has the potential to impact decision making for general managers.
All right. Salary caps, unicorns, and leprechauns. I'm on board. All things that I now believe in. Let's pretend they're there.
Let's pretend they're there.
Okay.
But I do want to ask the question for you is, considering some of the positions of need for the Seahawks, for me, I know I want to go into the draft having addressed and kind of shored up a lot of those positions that I look at as potential positions of weakness. And so that way, going into the draft, you aren't depending on your first round pick, and considering the fact that the Seahawks don't have a second and third, you don't want to have to be locked in to that idea of having to trade down just to fill needs that you could have addressed in free agency.
So you're saying address the majority of your needs in free agency if possible, and then fill in the gaps in the draft. Is that kind of your philosophy here?
That's my philosophy.
That's interesting. I agree to a little bit in the sense that some of those gaps could be filled by re-signing your own. So like Sheldon Richardson and Bradley McDougald.
Yeah.
I definitely want to see them re-signed. Like, we'll see how the market bears out, but I'd really like to see them resign. But beyond that, to me, I kind of take the opposite approach with my mindset when I think about the way that you're building a team. I don't want to get bogged down with all those middle tier contracts that you get through free agency, because let's be real, most of the guys that are hitting free agency, for the most part, are guys that other teams have given up on for some reason or another. If that's the case, I don't want to be paying them above market value. Now, in free agency, every so often, if you're a shrewd GM, you can pick up somebody like Michael Bennett at pennies on the dollar, like they did the first time that they picked up Michael Bennett and Cliff Averill and guys like that. So my thought process is re-sign your own, and if you can pick up one dude, let's say just one position group tends to be depressed in market value this year, then you have the ability then to go out, hunt for that guy, underpay.
Yeah.
Now that gives you some slight flexibility when you're drafting. It's like, okay, so we know we need more linebacker help. Okay, great. So you end up signing a guy kind of like they did last year. And now you don't have to worry about necessarily finding that linebacker in the first 3 rounds. You can take a flyer on a guy in the 5th instead. So it allows you this flexibility of, yes, you're still drafting for need, but you're not as needy. And I'd rather fill the roster full of really young talent coming in through the draft and undrafted guys than middle tier players. I think that's definitely the better way to go, and kind of churn the roster over that way continually, always churning it from the bottom with a lot of young guys, bringing them in like John Schneider and Pete Carroll did the first couple of years they were here. I feel like we've kind of stopped doing that.
Well, I really like the idea of looking where there's value in free agency, because I think back to the last period, and really one of the only free agents that the Seahawks hit on was Bradley McDougald, and a guy that was a really important backup to both Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor, filled in for both those guys. And that's a guy who he could be in the starting lineup next year, or maybe a guy like Delano Hill can be the guy who fills in behind Cam Chancellor and can play in that role instead of McDougald, because now after teams have maybe seen what he can do in filling in for Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor, maybe his salary now is more than the $1.8 million that you got him for in the past year. And maybe those salaries aren't as depressed like you were saying they could have been last year, and is why they were able to get him as inexpensively as possible. I was looking at the tight end market, and just the sheer number of tight ends coming into free agency this year, I could really see a lot of guys kind of toward the bottom end of that market coming cheap, and to where, guys like Jimmy Graham and Tyler Eifert are more toward the top. But maybe you can get a guy who hasn't been in there, like Gary Barnidge, who didn't even play all of last year, where, a guy who caught 1,000 yards and passes from the Browns a couple of years back. Maybe he's one of those guys that you get kind of on the cheap because he hasn't been on other teams' radar.
Yeah, was he injured all of last year?
He was injured toward the end of 2016, and then he had surgery, and I'm not exactly sure why he didn't come back at all during the regular season. Because it was a hernia injury, but he was released from the Browns. Oh. He's a free agent. And he's one of those guys, too, and we're going to talk a little about compensatory picks, but we saw this last week or so that Doug Martin, muscle hamster from the Tampa Bay Bucks, released from the team. Gary Barnidge is another one of those guys that you could go out and you could sign even before free agency, and they don't count against your compensatory picks.
Correct. So, yeah, Barnidge might be one of those guys you could take a flyer on for league minimum, get him into training camp, see what's going on there. Honestly, don't have a ton of interest in the free agent market for tight ends. I Feel like that's a position group that we can fill, A, from within, and then B, with a little more emphasis in the draft. Because I think Nick Vannett can get out there and block, and that's what we need the tight end to do. I don't need a guy to go out there and catch 1,000 yards worth of footballs. I don't need that out of the tight end position. I would rather see those resources spent on maybe a bargain offensive lineman if you happen to find one, or the right running back.
Yeah.
For example, I know LeGarrette Blount is going to be a free agent, correct?
Sure.
That feels like a cool fit, doesn't it? Like, if he kind of runs with that same kind of power, that Marshawn Lynch did, and people have often compared him that way. But he has that big physical bruising back with a championship pedigree and all that stuff, correct?
Yeah.
No interest in him. None.
I'm there with you.
Over the hill. But give me somebody like Carlos Hyde, who's got a lot of gas in the tank and was on an absolutely craptastic team the last 2-3 years. Now you got my attention. Get Doug Martin for a very reasonable price, either Eddie Lacy money or less. Doug Martin has far more potential than Eddie Lacy did last year.
Sure. I'd agree with that.
You've got my attention. Like, grab one of those guys, fill in the rest in the draft, and away we go, man.
Well, I think you bring up the one position where you could look to free agency to shore up, because as I go down the list, I'm trying into my mind to get an idea of even some of the position groups that I'm just not comfortable with when I look at the starters. And when I look at the available running backs, I see Chris Carson, CJ Prosise, and JD McKissick are the running backs who are essentially going to be on the roster next year for sure. That's a little bit iffy to me. So I'm a little bit iffy on the running backs. Fullback, you have Trey Madden, Justin Fowler. That part, that doesn't really, that's probably not even a position you would go out and draft in anyway. Wide receivers, Doug Baldwin, Tyler Lockett, Amara Darboh, David Moore, Cyril Grayson. If Baldwin and Lockett are your 1 and 2, your number 3 and beyond, that doesn't really matter.
I mean, it matters. You want a deep.
I mean, you hope Darboh can kind of roll into a number 3 role, right?
Sure. I'm still not counting out Paul Richardson being back next year.
Yeah.
What is he going to command in free agency? I think he's going to get hit with the Jermaine Kearse reality of 2 years ago, where he went out there and everybody went, meh.
Right.
I'm dead serious, man. People seem to think he's going to get big money, and I don't see it at all.
Well, I was looking at his salary projections, and if it's $6.2 million per year as it's projected,
no way.
I'm in the same boat.
Yeah, there's no way it's going to be 6.
You don't think?
Hell no.
Okay.
All right, Brandon. Let's do a little exercise here. You are the GM of, let's pick a team here, the Washington Redskins. Okay.
Yeah. Paul
Paul Richardson's agent gives you a call on the phone. Hey, P. Rich is going to be a free agent this year. You interested? Well, maybe, yeah. I mean, what's the price like and all that? And the agent starts coming back to you, negotiating a little bit. And in your head as the GM, here are the things that you're thinking. 4th-year player, has only been on the field consistently for 1 year, has put up very limited production and a few highlight reel catches. What's that worth to me? It sure as hell it isn't $6 million a year. Maybe 2, 3. There's no way I'd go a penny higher than that. I'm telling you, man, there is no way that market's going to be out there. So when Paul Richardson's agent looks at you, Brandon, as the GM of the Redskins and says $6 million a year, you're going to fall out of your chair laughing.
Well, that might be the one team that I would maybe question because of what they did picking up the Browns wide receiver last year and paying him $10 million plus for 1 year.
Terrell Pryor?
For Terrell Pryor, yeah. He had 1 year of solid production.
Yeah, that was more production than P. Rich.
I would also argue that I think P. Rich.
How many ACLs has Terrell Pryor torn?
I don't know. I don't keep track of his CLs.
Zero CLs. P. Rich has torn 2 ACLs.
Sure.
I mean, I'm just telling you, man, like if you're a GM, like that's not a guy you pay even close to mid-tier money for.
But it comes down to who's out there available in the free agency market.
In the draft, you can find a dude in the draft that's Paul Richardson.
The draft is pretty light on receivers this year.
Doesn't matter if a guy suits up every single game. You've done better than paying P. Rich $6 million a year. You can't trust him to be on the roster for an entire season. Not even close. Health is a part of talent, and on a scale of 1 to 10, P-Rich has a 3 in that category.
So I think we're both in agreement, though. The $6 million market value for P-Rich is probably a little bit too high. But if somebody's willing to give him that, okay. I mean, if he comes back for 2 or 3, then fine.
Anywhere from 2 to 4, I'm fine with it. And I think it's going to happen.
And if that's all it is, you're probably just looking at 1 year, and then it doesn't prevent you from signing Tyler Lockett to a longer term deal.
If the Seahawks do re-sign Paul Richardson, it's for no more than a 1-year deal. And if I'm Paul Richardson, boy, I'd do that in a heartbeat. Sign my 1-year deal for, $3-4 million. Keep getting them checks for 1 year, ball out for a year, and then cash in.
Yeah.
Because if he stayed healthy for 2 solid years, put up solid production in the offense next year, now he's looking at $10 million a year money. Bet on yourself, man. But I'm not talented and handsome like Paul Richardson, so I don't know. There might be.
That's true. It's a really good point.
Yeah.
You probably are paying a handsome tax when you sign Paul Richardson.
Oh, you better. That's a good looking man.
We've talked about this.
Got to be top 3 on the Seahawks, yeah.
Easy. All right. At the tight end spot, another spot with Jimmy Graham.
We just went from a conversation about a good-looking man.
Let's talk tight ends.
And you transitioned to tight ends. That's freaking hilarious, man. Okay. All right. The tight end.
Unintended comedy on the show sometimes.
There it is right there. Yeah.
With the potential departure of Jimmy Graham, then you have the only 2 guys you have left are Nick Vannett and Tyrone Swoops. So that's another spot where you say, yeah, I'm a little bit uncomfortable starting the season when those are the only 2 guys.
Yeah.
Need to address it some way or another, either through free agency or the draft.
Draft a guy, pay some league minimum guy. That's how you do that.
Yeah.
Why? That's not a premium position in this offense. I don't understand why you would put high draft pick resources towards it or big dollars towards it in the form of free agency. Now, after having the Jimmy Graham experience, which wasn't a bad experience, like I still thank you, Jimmy. He did a great job.
Tight end in Seahawks history. And he did it in 3 years.
Right.
Can I just say, when it comes to Jimmy Graham, the closer we get to free agency, he's the one guy I don't want to lose. Like, really? I know, I understand
I want to lose his number. I want to lose his cap hit.
In terms of the amount of talent he has for that position.
Yeah.
And just likability factor too.
I like Jimmy a lot too. Me saying don't resign him is no reflection on what I think of him, the human being. I think he's an awesome dude. Like, if somehow the salary cap fairy came by and said Jimmy Graham will play it for half the money, I would take Jimmy back in a heartbeat. But the way that, I don't know, and I guess it's different now with Schottenheimer, but the way that the tight end has been traditionally used in the Seahawks offense, it is not going to be a highly productive position. And we need somebody that will give us half of Jimmy Graham numbers in the passing game, but will give us 3 times the blocking ability. Mm-hmm. That's what we need if we're going to do this the way that Pete Carroll wants to do it. Run the ball.
In terms of salary numbers, would you rather keep Jimmy Graham, and I'm using the numbers from that are out there for projected salaries, would you rather keep Jimmy Graham around at $8.2 million or Paul Richardson at $6.2 million?
Well, I would take Jimmy.
Okay.
But I don't know on either of those.
You could see both not coming back.
Those are the tough decisions you have to make as a GM.
Well, speaking of tough decisions, offensive line. Now, I look at this and I'm actually, as weird as it sounds, I could envision a starting 5. Well, part of the reason, because I've seen all of these guys start on the offensive line this past year. But you have Dwayne Brown at left tackle. You have Ethan Posick or Risan Odiambo at left guard. Mm-hmm. You have Justin Britt, Joey Hunt at center. At the right guard spot, you have, it could be either Jermaine Ifedi, it could be Jordan Roos. And then at the right tackle spot, you have Jermaine Ifedi, or it may be Willie Beavers.
It better be Willie Beavers.
Or George Fant.
Better be Willie Beavers. I saw you did. Was it you that posted the Fant article in the Seahawks podcast?
Yes, it was. Yeah, the field goals hyping up Fant. Remember, don't forget, don't let go of the Fant hype train.
My God. We got rid of Tom Cable, remember? We're done with that experimenting on guys who have no experience playing the position being awesome thing. Like, we're done with that now, right?
He's still on the team.
We can all agree that's a poor idea, that does not work over the long term. Like, we all know that now, right? Like, I don't have to try to convince you all that that's a bad idea. Like, that's a consensus, right? Like, that's the real reality. Like, the real reality. It's got to be. We all have to agree on that, right? Right?
I'm not with you on this.
I'm on
the George Fant hype train, Adam. I can't get off. When you drink the Fant berry Kool-Aid, you can't just spit it back out.
It's can delicious. And should. Turns your brain purple or something because golly. Yeah.
So that said,
no, on Fant.
Do you address positions in free agency or the draft, or do you look at it? I mean, you have to get some guys, but are you going out there looking for a high price guy like Andrew Norwell or Josh Sitton, who sounds like he won't be back with the Bears next year?
Correct. Yeah. What position does Sitton play? I wanted to say it was center, but it's not center.
Left guard.
Is it? Oh, left guard.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Again, that all depends on the numbers. Like, what can you get these guys for?
He played for 8 last year.
So he's going to want more than that.
Or about the same, because that's what they cut.
Right.
They're cutting that salary. They decided that he wasn't worth 8 for this next year, or whatever he was scheduled to make. So
here's a question. No Jimmy Graham and Josh Sitton instead.
You're paying,
which is a hard name to say without making it sound like a cuss word. I want to go from Josh and then use the end of his last name or his first name as the start of his. You
have to be very articulate with his name.
Josh Sitton, not. I'm not trying to shh anybody when I start saying his last name. I don't want him on the team. This is going to be a disaster for me.
Well, that's decided. Hopefully the GM takes these kind of things into account.
Better. God, this is how it affects me. Yeah. That's what's important.
Bring back Luke Jokel.
Right. Lots of hard consonants, things I can say.
I wonder what Luke Jokel's going to get in free agency.
About 4 or 5 phone calls.
Yeah.
That's about it.
I was expecting you to say million, and then you said phone calls.
Yeah. I think he might get a phone call or two if he's lucky.
You think that they should legitimately go after a guy in free agency who's up toward the high, near 10 million, near double digits?
If it makes sense. I mean, it's one of those, out of all the places to plug a hole with a free agent, offensive line feels like one to me. Linebacker feels like one to me. And maybe even safety.
Yeah.
Like one more safety. Like if you spent a little bit of free agent money on one of those 3 positions, like pick one, right? And then fill the rest of it in with draft. Unless you can do, say, like $8 million a year for, say, Sitton, and then pick up random tight end free agent for $1 million a year, $1.5 million a year.
Okay.
And then you can fill in 2, then fill in the rest with the draft.
Well, see, it sounds like you're filling in a lot of those spots that I would look at in free agency versus filling it in for the draft.
No, I'm recognizing the same spots as you are. I think we're feeling the same thing there. I'm just saying you can't fill them all with free agents. You can't even fill the majority of them with free agents. Pick one.
Mm-hmm.
And then fill in the rest with draft.
Because even on the defensive line, I mean, if you're only talking about guys who are under contract right now, Michael Bennett's still under contract, Cliff Averill under contract, Frank Clark, those are your defensive ends. You have Noble Nwachukwu, who I don't know. I know I've seen his name on the back of a jersey in preseason, but
correct,
not a contributor. And then defensive tackles, you have Jaron Reed, Naz Jones, and Malik McDowell's still on the roster. You don't know what you're going to get out of him. Mm-hmm. Defensive line seems a little spotty, unless you're talking about bringing Sheldon Richardson back and plugging him in.
Yeah, I am talking about that. We're doing that.
Yeah.
Do that.
You should do that.
You should do that. He is a young top tier player at his position on defense, on the defense. Like that's pay Pay somebody in the trenches like that. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I'm okay with
that. That's the type of guy you pay.
Would it be a mistake if the Seahawks brought Jimmy Graham back and let Sheldon Richardson go?
Yes. Gigantic.
Okay.
Poor decision.
Well, defensive line, then one of those spots where they could address it in free agency. Linebacker, as you mentioned. I mean, when you have Bobby Wagner, KJ Wright, it kind of, whoever the third guy we discovered last year, it doesn't really matter a whole lot. They did all right.
Yeah, as far as a starter, sure. But I'm
They're still 27-28.
Yeah, but it's also time to start grooming the guy that's going to push those guys.
Oh, sure. And that's where you would address it during the draft. Correct. That makes sense to draft a linebacker this year. Maybe even relatively high.
I would not be stunned if that happens.
Cornerback, they are just loaded with corners on the roster right now with Sherman. Lane is still on the roster. Nico Thorpe, Shaq Griffin, DeAndre Elliott, Mike Tyson. Don't
be surprised if you see a couple 5th, 6th round picks thrown at DB. I don't think they're going to stop with that.
Well, and that's not even taking into account sheds of free agent this year. Bradley McDougall's a free agent. Justin Coleman, restricted free agent. Byron Maxwell. I mean, those are free agent guys that you could bring on, too, that are currently with the team. Again, doesn't impact compensatory picks when you're re-signing your own guys.
Yeah, I guess I forgot all those guys were free agents. The market for Byron Maxwell is going to be fascinating.
Yeah.
Because this is a guy that got paid a huge deal to go to Philly. Kind of flames out, gets traded to Miami, plays decent, but Miami has no interest for whatever reason.
They jettison him. He's shown that he's not a number one.
Right. Then comes back to the Seahawks and plays borderline number one corner.
Yeah.
I mean, he played close to that level, filling in for Sherman. And here he hits free agency again.
Yeah.
I'm going to be fascinated to see what GMs do with him. To me, there's only one team in the league that should sign him to any kind of decent money.
Jacksonville?
The Seahawks. It's the only place that's the only place you know that he plays well.
Decent money, though.
I mean, number 2 corner money.
Okay.
For, on a short, another year deal. Let him Darrelle Revis the crap out of the tail end of his career. Keep getting them checks, Byron.
Jeremy Lane money?
Yeah, Jeremy Lane money. Hell yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If he signs for that, heck yeah, man. Thank you.
Maybe a 2-year Jeremy Lane deal.
There you go.
Would you sign him or Deshaun Shedd?
I don't know that those are mutually exclusive, are they?
If you're going to you can't give both of those guys Jeremy Lane deals.
Is Shedd going to get a Jeremy Lane deal on the open market?
No, probably not.
I think you can get Shedd on the
Okay, well then cheap. Shedd or Coleman, because you're going to have to give Coleman probably
Shedd.
3.
Shedd.
Coleman has shown that he can be a good inside guy, though.
I understand that, but Deshaun Shedd, before he tore up his knee, was playing amazing football.
So you're going to have Shaq Griffin, Richard Sherman, Deshaun Shedd, and Byron Maxwell. You're going to have 4 guys who could potentially...
That are freaking studs, yeah.
Who you can't put all of them on the field.
It's called a dime defense. Hell yeah, you can.
I guess you could. Then you're taking KJ Wright off the field.
Well, sometimes KJ needs a blow.
All right. Well, maybe he can play the Cam Chancellor role on the field. Yeah, you know what? He probably could. Although that's not dime then, but whatever.
That'd be gigantic dime.
Well, that pretty much takes us, apart from safety. Who?
Yeah.
You have Earl. You have Cam Chancellor still on the roster. Delano Hill, Tedrick Thompson. Good job, spot track. Tanner McAvoy on the roster as safety.
Well,
yeah, maybe they know something we don't. What we haven't talked about, special teams. You got John Ryan, Jason Myers as kicker and punter.
Who?
Jason Myers.
Who the hell is that?
I think he kicked a little bit for Jacksonville and then got cut.
Oh, well, that was a roster move that I paid close attention to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see John Ryan gone. A very down year. I think when you see John Ryan gone, you'll have the same sort of feelings that you had this year about Hauschka being gone. Because I don't know if you recall this, Brandon, but before they signed Walsh, can you remember the general feeling of a ton of 12s towards Steven Hauschka. What a bum. Had a terrible year. Cost us games. Can't have that guy on the roster. Get rid of him. Hauschka stinks now. Blah, 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 blah. Goes to Buffalo, has a solid year, banging 50-yarders all the time. And, then you get stuck with Blair Walsh.
Uh-huh. Man, I wish we had Hauschka back.
I wish we had Hauschka back. I don't know how many times we sat here and be like, yeah, sometimes guys have a down year. They'll probably bounce back the next year. That's what will happen with John Ryan.
I don't mind when GMs approach the kicking position similar to fantasy, like the guys that you take care of last.
That's fine. Yeah.
But you still have to get a good one.
Yeah.
Like, it can't be terrible like Blair Walsh.
He wasn't terrible.
And I don't know.
But he wasn't good.
When it comes to punters, I mean, what does a terrible punter... John Ryan terrible. This year.
Yeah.
Like, if that's your bottom, like, you're not...
Right. That's not the worst a punter can be, by the way.
It's not the worst, no.
Not even close. Bad punting, especially for a team that wants to run the ball, stop the run, play a defensive game, low scoring, that smash mouth kind of football.
Yeah, you want a good punter.
You have to have a good punter.
Right.
Because field position plays a prominent role in that sort of game plan. Kickers are people too.
Well, we talked about them.
Yeah.
So there you go.
You know who else are people too? In a position that we didn't bring up that either one of us seem to be concerned about? Quarterback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quarterbacks are important.
Yeah. Taking any trade calls for Russell Wilson this week, Brandon?
No.
If you're John Schneider?
No. I mean, I guess you would pick up the phone and answer it just to be polite.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But I don't know if you spend a lot of time talking, unless it's the Browns. The Browns are maybe the one team that you listen to.
Really?
Just for a little bit.
All right. Pretend you're the Browns and give me a call right now. I'm John Schneider.
Hey, John Schneider.
Hey, this is Kevin Costner from the Cleveland Browns, the new GM.
What up, Kevin? I'm really glad that you gave me a call. And the ironic part is that in the movie it was the Browns and Seahawks that made a big trade in draft day. So,
well, as it turns out, I have two top picks. I'm thinking about sending your way. I got the number 1 and the number 4 pick.
Great. Hey, I'll tell you what. The number 1 and number 4. That's very interesting. How does Nick Vannett sound for those? That sound good?
For a 1 and a 4, John, you got him in the 3rd round.
Yeah, I know, and then we coached him up. All right, so what are you thinking then, Kevin, since that doesn't seem to float your boat?
I don't know if you know this, but we've kind of had a history of terrible quarterbacks in Cleveland. And I don't know.
I've noticed. Yeah.
I'm really unsure about...
You should get one of those guys.
I'm really unsure about trusting my scouting department once again on picking quarterback, and I'm trying to find. I'm shopping it around a little bit to see if I can get a quarterback for my 1st and 4th pick in the draft.
Sweet. Well, Boykin for a 1 and a 4, you got.
No.
I got you.
I can't.
I got you,
no.
Kevin.
He undrafted dude. That's not going to do it. Unproven.
Yeah.
No.
So what do you want for this 1 and 4? Come on, quit beating around the bush.
Give me Russell Wilson, and hear me out. You get the number 1 pick. You get to pick out of all the quarterbacks that are this year. You've shown that your scouting department actually works. You know that you can get a top quarterback with the number 1 pick. I have faith in you, John. Now you have the number 4 pick. And I know you need a running back. Saquon Barkley is going to be an incredible back. Could be there at the number 4 pick. You could have your pick of quarterback and a top running back, and you still have your awesome defense. We get Russell Wilson. It sounds like a good deal to me.
I feel like I can only answer this question with a question. Is Russell Wilson a top 5 quarterback in his prime, Kevin?
Absolutely. I think we could win more than 0 games with him.
Then no.
Okay.
That's as
I
far as a trade discussion goes for a franchise quarterback in his prime.
Well, I'm not done. I'm not done. I'm going to throw in.
I am. No.
I'm going to throw in our 1st round pick.
No.
For next year.
No.
And a 2nd round pick. You don't have a 2nd and 3rd round pick this year. How about you have that now?
You don't have a franchise quarterback in his prime. No. Never know. All the no's.
Pick an offensive lineman from our team. I'll throw him in too.
No.
You don't
fine.
You don't like the idea of having Joe Thomas and Dwayne Brown on the same team?
You know what I like? You know what idea I like better than that? Having Russell Wilson as my franchise quarterback for the next 5 years.
So you're saying there's no number of picks that I can throw in to make this work?
So what I'm saying is there's not a chance.
All right. Well, go back to eating your pancakes, John.
It's not pancakes, they're crepes. Whatever, Kevin.
See, that was healthy.
Yeah, you got that out of your system.
I need a little role play there.
Yeah.
Because I think that's as far as it goes, right? Like the idea of trading Russell Wilson. Are you freaking kidding me? Like I get people are bored and all that. That's fine. But he's a top 5 quarterback in his prime. No. That's it.
Would you be at all jealous of the Colts if they traded Andrew Luck for the 1st and the 4th and then had the 1st, 3rd, and 4th in the draft?
Not even close.
No, you wouldn't be jealous.
Not even close. No. Look, Andrew Luck is damaged goods at this point.
Sure.
And even when he was healthy, he's not nearly as good as Russell Wilson. He's just not.
I agree with you.
So, no, I'm not jealous. Go ahead and draft one of these quarterbacks out of this draft that all seem like a little bit of a crapshoot. I've yet to do a deep dive on all of them yet. But initially, there isn't one guy that I look at and it just first blush that I look at and be like, wow, that guy for sure, star. No, I'm not trading for some guy who's never played in the league. No, thanks.
I'd be a little sad to see Russell Wilson go.
They would burn Seattle down.
Yeah. You think?
Yeah. There'd be riots in the street.
You go,
cars on fire.
You would drive out to the VMAC and maybe picket just outside of Schneider's office.
Picket? I would light a Molotov cocktail and chuck it at the VMAC.
All right.
Like, that's not an example. It's on tape now. So if that did happen, understand, like, this will be used against me in the court of law. Yeah. Nothing I can do about it. I'm going to firebomb the VMAC if they do that.
You know what? Considering the number of hours it would take to get there, you should probably have an alibi built in.
I was asleep.
You should be able to find a way to have an alibi built in some 8-hour period.
Yes. Yeah.
Unless you know somebody with a private plane.
Hey, Jimmy.
Man, I don't want to see Jimmy go.
He's gone, man. Let it go.
Oh, it's hard. It's so hard to say goodbye.
I'm telling you,
yesterday.
Dang, I can't believe that was amazing. That was amazing.
I figure I have to sing in back-to-back shows now.
I want you to sing on every single podcast from here on out.
From here through the offseason.
Yeah, especially if they can end on a high note like that. That was fantastic.
I crushed it. I should probably be invited to sing the national anthem. If the gal from Black Eyed Peas can be invited to sing the national anthem, I should be able to do it.
What's wrong with Fergie?
Fergie did fine.
Okay.
She tried some things that didn't work. It's fine. Not going to crush her for it. She wasn't Carl Lewis.
You miss 100% of the pitches you don't take a swing at. Yeah. Good for Fergie. But if it was you, make no mistake, I would take a knee.
You probably should.
Yeah. All right, man. With Jimmy Graham, it's going to be okay, Brandon, because everything that has a beginning has an end.
I can at least look forward to comp picks for Jimmy Graham.
Yeah.
So when I look down the compensatory picks from last year, well, just to give people an idea of how compensatory picks work. And when I look at the Seahawks top free agents, I look at guys that will probably get more than $3 or $4 million on the open market that would actually bring a compensatory pick back to the team. So that means they would get a draft pick in 2019 for, let's say, Sheldon Richardson. If the Seahawks decide not to re-sign him, you're going to get a 3rd round pick for that guy because he's going to get anywhere from $13 million up if he goes to another team.
Yeah, probably.
And so he'd probably get you a 3rd round pick in a compensatory pick in the 2019 draft.
That sounds cool.
Jimmy Graham, probably $8 million plus, probably going to get you a 4th or 5th round pick, depending on how it all shakes out in free agency. Paul Richardson, if he gets $6 million plus, like people suggest, probably a 4th through a 6th round pick. And then the only other guy that I could maybe see getting $3 million plus would be Luke Jokel, maybe Bradley McDougall. And you even threw out Byron Maxwell. Mm-hmm. And then so those guys would probably get you anywhere from a 6th through a 7th. And you can have, I think, up to 4 compensatory picks. Like the Bengals this year are getting 4. The Packers are getting 4. I think the Cowboys, they're getting 4 compensatory picks, because they've just lost a ton of free agents last year in 2017. And so that's why when you approach free agency, for example, if let's say they keep Sheldon Richardson, then you're losing Graham, Paul Richardson, Luke Jokel, and one of your DBs, say Byron Maxwell or Bradley McDougall. Then you want to make sure that you're not signing guys above that $3 or $4 million threshold, because if you do, then if you go out and sign another tight end, say Tyler Eifert, that's probably going to cancel out the comp pick that you're going to get for Paul Richardson. So you're trying to maximize your draft picks that you get reimbursed for in 2019 versus the guys that you're losing in free agency in 2018. And the Seahawks team, in their history, they've shown that they consider that quite a bit and going into the offseason.
Yeah, it's a factor. A lot of moving parts there. Like,
oh yeah,
doing a mock draft for compensatory picks,
but that's why you could, instead of going after a guy like Carlos Hyde for a running back in free agency, you might consider Doug Martin, because he was a guy cut from his team rather than a guy hitting free agency.
Sure,
it makes a difference.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Okay. Well, I just wanted you to consider it.
I am. Yeah. These are all not unvalid points. It's the off season, Brandon. I don't know.
Well, let's get to our interview with Corbin Smith, and let's get to the second half of the show.
Oh, well, if you insist.
This week, we welcome on Corbin Smith, co-host of the Legion of 12 radio podcast and contributor to the Seahawks Wire, part of USA Today Sports. It's been a top go-to spot for a while now when it comes to Seahawks news, because I've made it known how I don't like the clickbaity stuff, and I know the Seahawks Wire is good for that. So and Corbin recently became a contributor there, and he's been dealing out some articles that I want to talk about. And they've been doing their podcast just about as long as we have, so I know this is way overdue. Corbin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah, you guys have been doing Legion of 12 radio now for what? Since was it right after the Super Bowl win?
Early 2014. And we've been doing this since that Super Bowl victory, really. And I was actually doing another podcast before that. So I've actually been doing Seahawks podcasts for 6 years. The first 2 years I was working for somebody else. And then I kind of got fed up with having to do some of the stuff he wanted us to do. And so I said, we're going to do our own show. So Legion of 12 Radio started in early 2014, and we haven't looked back since. So
really nice. Well, you've also been a contributor now to the Seahawks Wire for a little bit, and dude, you are cranking out the stories.
Oh, yeah, I'm really enjoying it. Being able to work with Liz Matthews and some of the other good writers that we've got. When the opportunity was presented to me, I kind of felt like running my own website and not having any other writers really. I just needed something to kind of reinvigorate me a little bit, and being able to work with this group of writers, I immediately have felt that rejuvenation. So I'm going to keep cranking them out. I'm having fun. I'm enjoying it again. So it's been a great opportunity for me.
Well, one of your latest stories here, and this was kind of the big news this week, especially being a division rival with the Rams acquiring Marcus Peters, cornerback from the Kansas City Chiefs. What was some of your takeaways? Is this a trade that makes the Rams better?
I'm not sure. This is one I'm going to have to wait and see on, because I think Marcus Peters is a really good player. He obviously is a interception machine. He's great at jumping after the football, making interceptions, creating turnovers, but he has had a little bit of a tendency to get beat. I think sometimes he loses focus a little bit. Sometimes he gets a little bit too cocky and he tries to go up and make plays and he doesn't get the football. And when that happens, you give up big plays. So the Rams are going to have to deal with those things, and obviously the off-field issues that have been lingering since college when he got kicked off Washington's football team. So, I mean, there's some baggage there to worry about. A lot of the reports that came out today were indicating that only the Rams, and I'm trying to remember what the other team was. They were linking the Niners. Yeah, because the Browns were being thrown around for a while, but then there were reports like the Browns really didn't want. I guarantee the Browns at least reached out.
Right.
I think more teams than that were interested because he's a very good player and he's an interception machine. He actually has more picks in his first 3 seasons than even Richard Sherman did with the Seahawks. But I think this is kind of a wait and see because there's no way they're going to be able to keep Trumaine Johnson, who I think is an underrated player at the corner position. So they're basically trading those two out. Peters might be slightly better, but how much is that really going to impact their overall defense? I think that's a wait and see. The Rams must feel that he's going to give them a little more of an edge in that secondary. It's wait and see on that.
And slightly cheaper, too, for the Rams. So I can understand
for now.
For now, exactly. I can understand them making the move. I heard some Seahawks fans, when Marcus Peters was being talked about as potentially being available from the Chiefs, hearing that discussion, well, do you consider, if the Chiefs would be interested in Richard Sherman, do you make the swap for Marcus Peters and, you got a cheaper guy at cornerback and you don't know if maybe Richard Sherman's going to stick around long term. Did you have any thoughts about that yourself?
I never considered the idea of trading Sherman straight up for Peters at all. I didn't think that the Chiefs would even go for that anyway with him coming off of his Achilles injury. Yeah. I just don't think the Seahawks were necessarily interested in that kind of a move because the Chiefs are going to want draft. They're going to want draft stock for that. They're going to want draft picks, and Seattle's already missing second and third rounders, and they're going to be trying to add picks, not get rid of them. So I didn't see any way that was happening. Even if the Seahawks were really interested, they would have had to give up future picks, or they would have had to give up some quality players to do it. And I just never saw that developing. So I'm not surprised Seattle's hat was never thrown in the ring. Also, considering this guy is, you could pick up his 5th-year option, which is going to be around $10 million, but he'll be cheaper for 1 year, and then you're going to have to pay him. So I don't think Seattle wanted to put themselves in that spot either.
Well, sticking with free agency, you also had an article out recently talking about Paul Richardson and kind of breaking down some video on him. And this is one of the players that Adam and I have gone kind of back and forth on as to whether or not he's going to stay in Seattle. A big part of it, I think, is going to have to deal with, it's going to come down to what his market is when he gets to free agency, right? Because I'm leaning, if he's up in the $6 million per year range, I kind of think it's outpricing what the Seahawks would be willing to pay for him. But, if it's less than that, if he hits the market and has the same kind of experience Jermaine Kearse did when he was a free agent, I could see him coming back.
It just seems like teams kind of, I don't know, they don't value the receivers Seattle has as much as Seattle values them.
Since Golden Tate, really.
Well, Golden Tate, and the thing is, I thought he might get more money than he did.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, when he actually hit the market, I thought he was going to hit a little bit bigger of a jackpot than what he did. I mean, he still made way more money than Kearse got offered by anybody else, which is why Kearse then came back. But Richardson's kind of in the middle of those two guys. I think that teams probably view him having a higher ceiling still than what Jermaine Kearse ever had. Being a former second-round pick, he's got that elite speed. He can take the top off defenses way more than what Kearse ever could have. I mean, obviously, Kearse has made some plays over the years where he beat people vertically, but he doesn't have the physical skills that Paul Richardson had. And you finally started to see those happening, those skills put on display in this 2017 season. And people were telling me, like, look, he only had 44 receptions. Yeah, but he had over 700 receiving yards and he had 6 touchdowns. He was one of Seattle's biggest weapons in their passing game. And I felt like there were games they didn't look at him enough. The Texans game, I thought he could have had 4 touchdowns. Wilson ended up hitting him twice, but he still had a really good game. And the misconception with him, this is what drives me nuts. Yes, he's had some injury issues in his football career. He tore his ACL in college. He tore it in the playoffs of his rookie season with Seattle. So he's had 2 torn ACLs, and he's had a couple other soft tissue injuries, but he's played 15 or more games in 3 of his 4 seasons. He's been available for the most part. He lost the 2015 season with that hamstring injury after he returned from his ACL. But I mean, aside from that, the dude's been healthy and he's tough. Any guy that has the bone sticking out of one of his fingers and then they pop it back in place and then he returns to the game is a tough son of a gun. So I don't think that should be a reason that deters Seattle from signing him. And like you said, I really think it just comes down to what does the market look like? Because I think the one issue Seattle's going to be dealing with, and I mentioned this in my article briefly, Jarvis Landry just got the franchise tag. There's still a chance Sammy Watkins could get it from the Rams, though I've been hearing that they're probably going to go with LaMarcus Joyner instead for that. But if they do go with Watkins, you just took two of the top receivers out of a market that really is a pretty weak receiver class. You took them out of the market, and other teams aren't going to even get a chance to try to sign them. So that's going to drive Paul Richardson's price up immediately if that happens. So.
And one of the places that people feel that the draft class is weak in too is at wide receiver.
Yeah, this is not a very good wide receiver class. There are a few guys that I think in the second and third round would be decent value picks, but I don't really see any of those elite studs in this class. So teams are going to be more willing to dish out money in free agency. I just don't see the Jermaine Kearse situation playing out. I could see somebody or, teams maxing out because they're worried about the injury history and the fact he's only had one really solid season. I can see them like, look, we're going to give you $5.5 million. And at that point, I think Seattle has to consider it, because if you look behind Doug Baldwin and Tyler Lockett, Lockett's going to be a free agent after this next season. And he's, he started to come on late in the year, but he didn't look right most of the season coming off that broken leg. So it's wait and see with him too. But you look after those two guys, Seattle's got a bunch of unknowns at the wide receiver position. We don't know if Amara Darboh is going to be able to actually do something this year. He didn't play much as a rookie. And David Moore looks like there could be some potential, but he suited up for a game, didn't even make a catch. And Tanner McAvoy had a really rough season. So that's what's behind those two guys. And if you lose Jimmy Graham too, you lose Graham and Richardson, that's over 30% of your receiving yards from last year. That's a big hunk of your offense that you now have to replace. So if he's in that $5 to $5.5 million range, I think Seattle's got to be willing to put that money out there because he's a younger receiver and he is coming off a good season in which he and Wilson are finally getting some chemistry. So I think they got to consider it at that point. If it goes above $6 million, I think you get priced out because of their cap space, and I'm just not sure he's worth that much money.
Well, you talk about the injuries being a misconception. For me, I had the thought that Paul Richardson essentially being a guy that ran down the field and Russell Wilson chucked up the ball to him. That just seemed like kind of taking on that Jermaine Kearse role of just the guy that he could trust, throwing it downfield to, and Paul Richardson would be the guy who came up with the football. Now, one of the things your video breakdown pointed out, and I forgot, was a lot of those clutch catches along the sidelines that he had this year.
Oh, yeah, he's definitely learned from Doug Baldwin in that area, because Baldwin has always been really good with his body control around the sidelines, field awareness, knowing where he's at and getting those toe taps down. But Paul Richardson was just as good at that last year. And I have a ton of clips in that film breakdown indicating that. And the other thing that really stood out to me, the more that I watched all 16 games again to see every snap Paul Richardson was on the field. That's how long I spent looking over this stuff. But it just amazed me how he adapts his routes when Russell Wilson is out of the pocket. I think that to me is something you have to be able to do to play wide receiver for the Seattle Seahawks. You have to be able to continue working even when the play breaks down, because we know what Russell Wilson can do. When the play looks like it's dead and he's trying to run away, he makes miracles happen sometimes. Receivers, though, have to be willing to continue working to get open so that he has somebody to throw to. And Paul Richardson does that regularly. He's really good at it. A couple of his touchdowns came on plays last year where the play looked broken down. Russell Wilson scrambling around. He's getting hit, and he finds Richardson, who was continuing to try to get open, and gives him a narrow window, and bam, touchdown. So I think those two things are areas people don't realize how good he is as a football player. He also breaks a lot of tackles and makes people miss in open field. He's kind of slithery like a snake. And so I just think there's a lot more quality there than people realize. He hasn't been able to put it together till last year, but you feel like he's turning the corner, so you don't want to just let him walk away for, if somebody else offers him $4 million and he leaves, you got to wonder what Seattle's doing. But if they get priced out, they get priced out. Sometimes you just got to let guys go.
4 seems like the ceiling for me, and a lot of that has to deal with the fact that I think that Lockett's due for a bounce back season. We started to see it come back. I think that speed that we knew that he had, we saw it come back right at the tail end of the season.
Yeah, when he returned to that kickoff against the Cardinals in the last game of the season, he looked like rookie Tyler Lockett. Yeah. So I think that we are going to see him bounce back more. He did play better at the end of the season. My thing is, though, I still wonder about him. It seems like sometimes he and Wilson have a hard time connecting because I don't know if it's the fact that Lockett is a really short receiver or what, but it just seems like he overthrows him a lot. And it seems like that'd be hard to do with a guy that runs like Lockett does. Some of those deep balls, he overthrows them. But Paul Richardson's a taller receiver and his ability to high point the football too. Tyler Lockett struggles with that, being a shorter receiver, but Paul Richardson is really good at that. So Paul Richardson, to me, has a more complete game as a wide receiver, but Tyler Lockett brings some other things to the table that he can't do. Like we saw Richardson try to return kicks early in his career. As fast as he is, he wasn't a good special teams guy. So there's different values there. It depends what direction the Seahawks really want to go, because if they want to really get back to that, we're taking shots downfield mentality. I mean, both these guys can burn you doing that, but Paul Richardson has that bigger, taller body. He's lanky, but I mean, he's taller and really high points the football well. So a lot of things they've got to consider here while free agency quickly approaches here.
Well, one direction they have to consider where they want to go is whether or not they keep Jimmy Graham and keep him around, or I see that you have them down as considering Tyler Eifert potentially.
Yeah, and I'm not biased when I say this because I did get to play against Tyler Eifert in high school, so I've known him for a long time. I'm not biased. My analysis was not biased, though. I've seen what the guy can do when he's healthy, and obviously that's the big issue here. This is a guy that has legitimately had injury problems. He's missed over 40 games in his 5 seasons in the NFL, so that's a big red flag.
Yeah.
But here's my viewpoint. I think Safarian Jenkins is going to be a guy Seattle's going to be looking at. I'm just wondering if his value is maybe going to exceed what I think he's worth on the market, because the tight end free agent class is not very good. I think Burton from Philadelphia is going to get paid way more than he's worth. He's a very versatile player, but he's coming off of a Super Bowl game that he played really well and had a good season. So teams are going to pay more than what he's probably worth. And you got Jimmy Graham, who's going to be probably leaving Seattle to go to another system. To me, Eifert's a guy that if you threw a bunch of incentives in there, like, look, you could make this much money if you're healthy and you're producing for us, I'm taking that chance every day of the week. I'm not going to give him a contract with a bunch of guaranteed money because, look, you have not been healthy, but just a change of scenery. And it seems like some of his injuries have just kind of been freak ones, like the one where he dislocated his elbow in 2015. I think it was 2015 that he did that. Maybe it was 2014, actually. 15 was when he was in the Pro Bowl. 2014, that was just a freak injury. He just landed funny and his elbow got dislocated. Crap happens. I think it's a guy you got to at least kick the tires on, because at one point he was arguably the best receiving tight end in football. 2015, he was a monster. And the half season he played in 2016, he was on pace to put up similar numbers if he would have played all 16 games. So he's a guy I think Russell Wilson would fall in love with, and he also can block, which is the big difference between him and Graham. He'll go in there and he'll get nasty with defensive ends and stuff. He's not scared of defensive linemen. He'll block them. So I think he's a guy you at least got to look at. I know people are scared about the injuries and stuff, but you give him an incentive-based contract, that's a low-risk, potentially very high-reward deal. If it doesn't work out, you didn't pay him that much.
Well, let's move over to draft and talk a little bit about that, because you've looked at a little bit of pass rush. You've talked about the draft struggles for the team in some of your recent articles. You've talked about some potential trade down options for Seattle, and you've talked a little bit of running backs. So let's talk about draft history for the Seahawks. And really, I think where we as Seahawks fans see part of the problem, they haven't picked any Pro Bowlers here in recent drafts, and that's started to get them into trouble a little bit as far as some of their aging stars and the injury situations, which they found themselves in this year.
Yeah, after I wrote that article, I started to consider, Pro Bowl maybe is not the best measure, but even all pro, they have not had a positional player since the 2012 draft that has ended up being a all pro player. And so I went back and did some further research. I didn't edit my article or anything, but you just look at the classes that they've had. I think this 2017 draft class that we just had has the potential to be extremely good. You look at the picks they had. Shaquille Griffin, I think, is going to be a stud at corner. He really came on late in the year. Before he got hurt with a high ankle sprain, Nas Jones was arguably their best rookie, in my opinion. He was dominant at times. So those two guys are building blocks. Ethan Postic, I saw some things I liked. I saw some film that I didn't like, being an offensive lineman and coached up, I'm coached up in parentheses here, by Tom Cable. I think getting him somebody that maybe maybe knows what they're doing a little bit will help him a ton. Get stronger. That's his biggest weakness. He's got to get stronger, and I think he'll end up being a pretty good player. But you got those three. And then Chris Carson in the 7th round, who, if he wouldn't have got hurt, who knows what that running game looks like, because that blocking was really atrocious the first 4 games. Yeah. And he still was on pace for over 1,000 yards. So Chris Carson, to me, is a guy that could still end up being a stud running back. We'll see how he responds from this injury. But that class overall, I really like. The problem is they just have not picked well in recent years. There's too many 2nd and 3rd round picks that have been wasted, even last year. Who knows if Malik McDowell is ever going to suit up for this team? If he does, maybe he ends up taking that bust label off. But for right now, that's a horrible pick for the Seahawks. The year before that, they had 3 guys they drafted in the 3rd round: C.J. Prosise, Reese Odiambo, and Nick Vannett. And really, Prosise has shown he can be good, but the dude's been in the ice tub way more than he's been on the field. And Odiambo has really struggled. And Nick Vannett, we've hardly seen him on the field. And now he's going to have to probably play a lot, especially if Graham and Luke Wilson both leave. But those are picks right now that if 2nd and 3rd rounds where teams that are championship teams build their roster. And there's just too many picks right now in that draft range that just haven't hit. Obviously, you've got your Frank Clarks and Tyler Lockett's of the world. Paul Richardson started to come on, as we just talked about. Justin Britt, 3rd position he goes to. He finally figures it out some. But, I mean, none of those guys are stars. So maybe Frank Clark you could put in that category, but they just haven't really picked anybody that's an absolute stud. And in those draft ranges, they've had too many picks, I think, that have gotten away. Too many years where they haven't had a first-round pick, and that's finally caught up with them a little bit. So there's a lot of different factors at play here. But any way you slice it, they've still picked some good players, but in a 5-year stretch here, they've definitely taken a step back from what we saw the first 3 years of the John Schneider, Pete Carroll regime. Well,
the good thing is this year we do have a first-round pick, but we don't have a 2nd or a 3rd round pick. And that leaves them in the situation where, one, they either have to trade some of their current players to fill those 2nd and 3rd round spots, because we know John Schneider's not going to want to go from picking number 18 to picking in the 4th round. And that's why I think you took a look at the idea of trading back. Well, they've been trading back with their first pick almost every year now. We traded back into the 2nd round last year.
We're just trading it away in general.
Yeah, exactly. Percy Harvin, Jimmy Graham. A number of times we've traded back the Seahawks. We've seen them trade it back. And so you looked at a few options. You looked at trading back to the Bills. You looked at the Saints, the Patriots, the Steelers, and the Jaguars. Out of those teams, which one did you think made the most sense for Seattle?
Well, I tried to order the article in order of the 5 that I thought were most ideal, with the first one, the Bills one, being the one that really I wanted. And the reason I liked that trade is that you're still going to have a first-round pick at pick number 22, so you're only dropping back a few slots.
Yeah.
Buffalo might be willing to do this if there's a quarterback they like that has slipped to 18. They need a quarterback. So they might be enticed to be like, look, we're going to give you our first round pick number 22, because they have 2 first rounders, number 21 and number 22. So they might be very willing to give up that 22nd slot. Seattle's still in the first round, and they could trade that down again if they wanted to get even more picks. It gives you a lot more flexibility than if they drop back to 29 or 30.
Sure.
If you're at 22, that holds a lot more value to teams. You could have one of those teams at the back now trade for that one. My logic there also is they could get a 2nd round pick from Buffalo in addition there. And Buffalo's got 2 second rounders, I believe, so they might be a little more willing to do that anyway. You get a 2nd rounder from them, so now you have a day 2 pick. And you, like I said, you can get more if you trade back further, but you could still get a pretty good player at pick 22 that you might not be able to get if you're pick 29, 30. It just gives them more flexibility. I really like that trade. The other one that I was surprised how much I liked it, you're not going to get a first rounder from New England with the trade that came up with, but you get a 2nd rounder and I believe 2 third rounders from them. And that gives you 3 picks on day 2. Now, looking at their recent history, maybe that's not the best way to go about it, but I think this draft has a lot of really quality players at certain positions that you can get on day 2. It's not the best draft ever. There's some positions that are pretty weak, but I think you can get a really good running back in the 2nd, 3rd round range. I think you can find some offensive line help potentially. There's some good edge rushers, not great, but there's some good value picks in the 2nd and 3rd round. I think you can get some secondary help there. So a lot of the areas they need, linebacker, I think you can get some good linebacker depth there. They haven't picked a good linebacker since Bobby Wagner, so they need some help there to get some youth at that position. I just feel like this is a draft. If you had a bunch of picks in the second and third round and you use them efficiently, which again, they haven't done a great job of that, but if they could turn things around this year in those 2 rounds, that could be something that catapults them back towards the top of the division and competing for a division title again.
Well, and you make the argument too, and one that I think it kind of lends itself toward sticking with the 18th pick, because one of the things that the Seahawks have shown is when they pick in the top 20, they generally land a player that's been very valuable to the team. I think Bruce Irvin, I think Earl Thomas, Russell Okung, all of those guys.
Before Okung had his injury issues, right. Absolutely. Yeah, all those guys were good first-round picks.
And those are guys who have been in the top 20. Now, outside of that top 20, it hasn't worked out. You're talking James Carpenter. Jermaine Ifedi, and then the guys in the second round who we've talked about before. So it kind of makes me want them to stick at 18 and maybe go pass rush, maybe go defensive tackle. There's guys there.
There's 3 guys, I think, if they are still available, Seattle has to pick at 18. I think that the talk about Derwin James, absolutely. If he is available at 18, I think they have to strongly consider just taking that pick because to me, he's a game-changing player. He could be a guy that could end up being a Cam Chancellor type that you can bring up and have him play like an extra linebacker. And they're going to need that here at some point. Even if Chancellor can play this year, we don't know what's going to happen there. But getting somebody right now like that, you take advantage of that if he's available. I'm not getting my hopes up about any of the top linebackers falling, but if somehow George's linebacker Roquan Smith fell that far, I would take him. Could you imagine him and Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright roaming the field? I mean, you're talking about 3 very instinctive, athletic linebackers. KJ Wright might not be here after this year too, so that's a guy that could step into his place. You have him and Bobby Wagner on the field, so that's a guy I would probably use my draft choice on, and I wouldn't use it on a first or on a running back. I don't think that this is the draft class. Now, if Saquon Barkley was available at 18, sure, which is never going to happen, but then I would consider it because he's a generational talent. But I wouldn't use the pick on Darius Geis or any of those guys. Late first round, if you trade back, then maybe I consider it. But I just think there's only a couple guys that are probably going to have a chance realistically to be available that are worth keeping that pick there. I guess that's why I like the Buffalo trade down idea the best, because you're really not going back that much further in the draft and you're getting a pick for that second day.
Well, you mentioned a safety, you mentioned a linebacker. Anybody on the defensive line that you would go with that 18th pick?
I really like the Marcus Davenport kid from UTSA, Texas San Antonio. He's kind of raw. I don't know if I want to pick him at 18. I might be more inclined in the 20s or mid 20s to late part of the first round to go after him. I think he's going to be a good player. He's just a little bit raw. And then I have a guy that I wrote an article about today, actually, and a lot of people are giving him third, fourth. I've even seen fifth round grades. I'm not sure what film they're watching, but Duke Ejiofor from Wake Forest is a guy that I really love. Every time I watch him, he's not a great athlete for a defensive lineman, but he kind of reminds me of Michael Bennett, the way he plays the game. He can play all four spots along the D line. He's 270 pounds, so he's big enough to play the interior on pass rushing situations. He plays with violent hands, and the dude is just a football player. He makes up for his athleticism with how instinctive he is. He had over 30 tackles for loss the last 2 years and 17 and a half sacks on Wake Forest. So, I mean, nobody has heard of him because he played for the Demon Deacons, but I think he's a guy, if he comes into the combine and he posts better numbers than expected and shows he's more athletic maybe than the film suggests, you know you're getting a really good football player. If he adds that to it, he could be one of those guys that goes from being a third-round pick to being a first-round pick because you know he can play the game. He's extremely productive. So that's kind of a sleeper I'm going to throw out there for you.
Well, maybe we don't want him to do too well at the combine then. They'll kind of stay under the radar.
If he's available, if you can get him in the second or third round, I'm taking him right now because I just think he's an instinctive, he's a very technically sound football player. I know Seattle likes their athletes. They worry about athletic traits as much as anybody, but this dude, just look at his numbers and watch the film. He's a football player. There are some flaws there, but there's no perfect player out there. I think he's a guy that Seattle would love to have in the defensive line because of his versatility, and he's just a football player. He gets into the backfield all the time and makes plays. When he gets his hands on you, you're going down. So,
well, you talked about Saquon Barkley and, him being a guy that you would take there. Otherwise, no running backs in the first round. I understand that perspective. But there is the perspective of the Seahawks needing to get better at the running game this past year. And we talked about Chris Carson, and we don't know necessarily if he's going to bounce back and be that same type of guy that we saw those first 4 games of the season. So you have looked at running backs, and one of the guys you threw out there was Oregon Duck. This is probably going to make a lot of Huskies fans really mad, the idea of having an Oregon Duck on the Seahawks. But Royce Freeman, what do you like about him?
What I really like about him is the fact that he's experienced running the zone run game. He's extremely patient at times. He reads his blocks well. And for being a bigger back, he's got good explosive speed when he gets past the second level. So those are some things I really like about him. I do have some concerns about as big of a back as he is. It seems like there's times he just goes down with an arm tackle. So I feel like he needs to be a little bit more physical of a runner. But as I talked about in my article, I think he's a guy, if he's available in the third round, and you haven't taken a running back and some of the other guys I value ahead of him are gone, then his experience running in the zone scheme, I think, is a big deal, especially with Seattle running a lot out of shotgun now. That's something he's very familiar with playing at Oregon. So with Seattle being more, and who knows what they're going to do under Brian Schottenheimer, but we know with Russell Wilson's athleticism, they like to come out of shotgun. I would see Royce Freeman being able to adjust to that very easily because he's used to it from his college experience. But he is not really the running back. I mean, I would pick him if he's the best one available in the third round. Rashad Penny is probably the guy that I would like to see Seattle draft the most. Mm-hmm. If they're not going to get one of those top couple guys, I just think people are overlooking him. And they're like, he played at San Diego State. He didn't play against great competition. How many players do you see in the league from the Mountain West Conference that are really good players? There are a lot of them. So I don't want to hear that. Look who he played against stuff. The dude's a ball player. Got incredible vision. He's a touchdown scoring machine. He can catch the football. I put together a couple clips with him making one-handed catches. I mean, he can do everything. So if they could get him, he's a 220-pound running back too. He's not a small fry. He's got a good body on him. He'll run through guys at the end. He's not a Marshawn Lynch trucking back, but I mean, he lowers his shoulder to get extra yardage. He screams Seahawks back to me every time I watch him run. So if they could get him in the second or even the third round, I would be ecstatic. That would be my ideal running back that they pick. Put him with Chris Carson and make that your 1-2 punch. I think Seattle's run game would be reinvigorated, especially if the line turns around with Solari coaching it.
Well, you've already sold me on Penny over Freeman, because as soon as you said they couldn't drive through arm tackles, I got to thinking back to the 2017 offensive line, and you're going to run into a lot of arms.
Penny's not exactly a power running back, but he'll go down occasionally with somebody shoestring tackling him and stuff. But I mean, he runs hard. He's a more physical runner than Royce Freeman is, and I think he's just overall a more complete package. I think Freeman's a good value pick in the mid to late third round. I think Rashad Penny would be a steal in the second round. I actually have him down as my third running back in this class. I have him right behind Darius Geis, who's my number 2 guy, and then Saquon Barkley's in the clouds compared to everybody else. But if you were able to get your hands on Penny in the second round, I know some people don't. They're like, he doesn't have elite speed, whatever. I guarantee he surprises you at the combine, and I've seen plenty of scouts talking about how he's a second round pick. So I think that's probably where he's going to fall. He'll be in that second, maybe early third round range, but he's not going to fall any further than that. The guy's a dynamite football player.
So if they do make that trade happen with the Patriots, then you're talking that they could get a running back, they could get a pass rusher, and then they still have one other spot to, maybe address the offensive line.
Here's my crazy idea. If they could get, and I know a lot of people say he's not any higher than a 6th or 7th round pick, but if the Seattle Seahawks took Shaquem Griffin in the third round, I would love the pick. I would give it an A+. I think he has first round talent. Every game that I've watched, I watched his brother last year when Seattle drafted him. I watched a bunch of film, and I couldn't keep my eyes off of his brother. I was trying to figure out who it was. I'm like, who is number 18? I didn't even realize he was missing a hand until I got to the third game. They're like, yeah, he doesn't have a hand. And I'm like, no way. But the dude is so versatile. He can pass rush guys off the edge. He can drop back and be a defensive back against guys in coverage. He's a great practice player. He fits everything Seattle Seahawks football is all about. And you can't tell me that putting him alongside Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright to learn from those two wouldn't pay dividends. I think he would be a great player for them right away. He'd be great on special teams. So if we could get Rashad Penny, get ourselves either an offensive lineman or maybe we get Ejiofor in the second round, get Penny and Ejiofor, and then we get Shaquem Griffin. That's an A-plus draft, in my opinion. You just nailed
Corbin.
those 3 picks.
Oh, you're giving me pain here. I'm already full steam ahead on the Shaquem Griffin hype train, so I just can't go any faster.
I just tell people, I've had some other people that know a lot of football that have been like, he's no more than the 7th round pick. It's just a feel-good story. You have not watched football then.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Watch that game against Auburn. He single-handedly wrecked that game for them in the second half. He was in the backfield every play. They were trying to double him up. And I tell you, he uses that arm that he's missing a hand on. He uses it so well as a club and using rip moves and stuff when he's trying to get off of blockers. I mean, he has really adapted to using that as an effective pass rushing weapon. I mean, I just love watching the kid play, and obviously the type of individual that he is as well. It's not just because his brother's on our team and I like him. I just think he is one of the best linebackers in this draft class. And people talk about him, but I just don't think they talk about how good he really is.
Yeah. And one of the things that the Seahawks, where other teams are looking at, I don't know, something like not having a hand as a negative, I feel like the Seahawks might be a team, well, and especially having his brother on the team, that would be something that they would look past. And
they need it. They need an athletic linebacker that can play football. They have not drafted one in 5 years. They need one.
Yeah. And 2 other guys that had the most starting experience at the other position are free agents.
And those guys are both, Terrence Garvin's really a special teams guy, and Michael Wilhoit at this point in his career is getting to be old enough. You can't really count on him to be a starter or play significant snaps on defense. So they need a young guy that they can develop. And he's somebody, I think, like I said, you bring him in there, he's going to learn quickly from those other 2 linebackers, and he's going to find his way onto the field quicker than you'd expect. And he's going to, not just special teams, he's going to see some action on it because he's a guy that can play different areas of the field. There's versatility there. So again, I'm extremely high on him. I think you get him in the 3rd round, that's an absolute value pick. I don't expect anybody's going to pick him that early, but
the problem now is that if the Seahawks don't get him, I'm going to be disappointed.
Yeah, you can't get too hung up on a player. What I don't want to see happen, because this is something I actually had a dream. This is how my dreams are messed up. I dream about football stuff, but I had a dream that Bill Belichick picked Shaquem Griffin.
Oh,
but isn't that the type of move he would make?
Yeah,
he does not care if there's a hand missing. He's like, you're a football player, and you're gonna be a leader. You're gonna do what I tell you to do. You're gonna be great in the clubhouse. So that's the kind of team that would want him. So as long as he doesn't end up there, or I would be devastated if the 49ers or the Rams got him. Yeah, I would be devastated. But I wouldn't get your hopes up too much, just because how many times do you actually get the player that you want, especially when it's somebody that's a mid-round pick. It's such a crapshoot. But, man, if we want to dream, that would definitely be the draft I would like, getting Rashad Penny, Ejiofor, and Shaquem Griffin. That to me would be a home run. Obviously, that none of those guys are offensive linemen, but – if they didn't pick Ejiofor and they got an offensive lineman, I'd be fine with that too. But sure, those are 3 guys I'm extremely high on that are maybe going to go in that draft range. So that makes that Patriots trade look a little bit more valuable.
Well, Corbin, really want to thank you for coming on this week. And if people want to check you out, where's the best place to find you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Corbin Smith NFL. I also have a page on the Seahawks Wire. I've been posting multiple articles daily, so you can check out my work on there as well. And our website, Legion of 12 Radio, it's not going to be up much longer, but if you want to see our podcast, that's going to be continuing to roll on YouTube. You can just search Legion of 12 Radio, and all of our podcasts are on there.
Corbin, I'm glad we were able to do it. I'm sorry it took so long, but thanks again for coming on the show.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
A big thanks to Corbin Smith for coming on the show this week, helping us hold things down in the offseason. Speaking of people helping us hold things down in the offseason, our members of the flock, and we got a couple emails coming up, and a quick thanks to Jake Burdine for giving us a raise this last week, up from 5 to 6. Thanks, Jake.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
If you go to getintheflock.com, you can be like Jake. And if you want to help us out, or seahawkerspodcast.com/support. I know there's events going on in the off season. There's a couple ticket websites that give us a little bit of a kickback. So if you're going to an event and you want to use StubHub, seahawkerspodcast.com/tickets, and it gives a little kickback to the show if you want to help out.
Sweet. Yeah. No, it's a great way to do that. In fact, I was going to buy some tickets to go to Trombone Shorty was the headliner, and Galactic is going to be opening for him along with other couple really cool funk bands. I'm in.
Couple emails here. One from James Bacon. Bacon's for real. I love James Bacon.
I do too.
Says, so after listening to your latest pod, it got me thinking about off-season topics you guys could do. There are 31 other teams that have various superstars or just dudes that are studs, guys that you wish somehow, some way, they'd be a Seahawk. Why not go through every other team one at a time and each pick a player you'd like on that team and how they'd help Seattle? Do one team a week and let everyone know which team is next so we can all look at that roster. Who we would lose at that roster spot because, not because of cap, but because you're swapping out a player. Talk about why this player is your chosen one. It'd be an awesome time killer and it'd get everyone involved. Hope this helps.
I like where Mr. Bacon's head's at. So I like this idea. We could do it, a division an episode and each pick one player off of each team. Mm-hmm. Quickly go through it. Yeah.
I could see that.
That works for me. I like it.
Thanks, James. Another email here, suggestion from John Davison. Said he really enjoyed the interview with Sam as it was a completely different angle to the show. How about a feature on all of the new coaches? It would be interesting for me as the coaching side of it is not well publicized over here. You could do one a week, and with the amount of coaches we hired, that would get you into the preseason. I've had a look at my fly tying books and could tie you some sea bass flies if that would help. Go Hawks. Yes. From John.
Yes, that would help.
We should send some sea bass flies to John Schneider, maybe.
And Janikowski.
Yeah, make that connection.
So what John is saying is he's ready to hear me just yell for an entire episode about Brian Schottenheimer.
Well, we got Brian Schottenheimer down now with Sam, so I don't know.
I'm not done yelling about
it. Okay. Well, I could see us covering Mike Solari, Ken Norton Jr., he didn't really have a Ken Norton Jr. defense in Oakland. That was Jack Del Rio's defense, just like he's coming back and he's going to be doing Pete Carroll's defense. So that I don't know if there's as much to discuss there. Maybe we can get Bruce Irvin on to talk about how great of a coach that he thinks, because he's been out there in the media talking about hyping up Ken Norton Jr.
Well, you know who I expect to talk to next week?
Who's that?
Bruce Irvin. Get on it, dude.
Okay.
Yeah, all right.
Bobby Wagner would be okay too. KJ Wright, you guys could come on, talk about your former linebacker coach, now current defensive coordinator.
I wouldn't be sad about that.
No. Why don't you make it happen? Why do I have to do all this?
You got way more pull than I do.
You're the co-host of the Seahawkers podcast. What more pull do you need?
Yeah, I'm definitely in the number 2 seat though, so
it's fine.
Yeah. Plus, I don't have producer next to my name like you do.
No, I suppose. But you could.
Well, I do. I mean, I lie all the time.
Well, I just do better and better at life.
All right, man. My do better this week is for a Turkish airline called Transavia?
Nailed it.
Got it. Transavia. Title of the article was this. Headline. Farty passenger forces flight to make emergency landing.
Wow.
Apparently some dude in the middle seat was ripping them like the entire flight. Started pissing off the other 2 passengers. Big brawl starts out on the plane. Big brouhaha. Whole thing has to be scuttled. They take and make an emergency landing because some dude was farting up a storm. Like, there's not enough air recirculation to make this okay. Like, you couldn't calm this situation down. You couldn't just lock that dude in the bathroom for the next hour or so. Just be like, here, just go and just go here. Have at it, Haas. Yeah. Couldn't find another way.
No, got to land the plane. Land the entire plane.
Yeah. 4 passengers end up getting arrested over it. What a debacle. Over farts. I never want a plane to land over farts. So to Transylvania, do better.
Do better. Well, at least there's some equality in the world, because I saw a headline where one plane was forced to land because a woman was complaining about her cramps and they kicked her off the plane. I didn't get into it. I don't know who it was, but apparently
I'm almost sympathetic to this, actually.
Yeah.
I
think it's
I don't want to hear about lady times. Go.
You're off the plane. We're landing. You're off. I don't want to hear about it.
Yeah. There's stuff about dudes you don't want to hear about. That's fine.
My do better this week for Home Depot. I talked about my appliance issues a while back, and just what a pain it was trying to have to go through the hassle of, finding a repairman myself, because they didn't have any of their own authorized people that they could just call up and be here. So I go through the whole rigmarole of having a dude come out and look at it. Well, he can't find the part. It's apparently not available anymore, which is concerning to him with the fact that the dryer is only 2.5 years old. Like, they should still have parts around. You should still be able.
They want to sell new ones.
Yeah. Well, and his concern was the fact that we'd already gone through 2 control boards. It might be a defective part.
Bad engineering, maybe.
And the fact that mine caught on fire. Yeah, it's probably bad engineering. But
you're saying fire from the dryer is a bad thing.
I've heard.
Okay. All right. That's probably fair.
I kind of think that they should be engineered to not catch on fire.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair expectation.
Well, they say, if he can't find the part, give us the part number. We'll try and track it down. They come back to me. Okay, they couldn't track it down either. So here we go. Okay, they're going to reimburse me for the dryer because it can't be repaired, even though I have this contract that says, they're supposed to be able to repair it.
Yeah.
Well, turns out after they say, okay, send us the paperwork, we're going to go ahead and reimburse you. Am I okay then to go buy a dryer now and just you guys can reimburse me with a check? Oh, yeah. Yeah. I go get a dryer, get it installed, bring it back home.
Did you get an old dryer?
I didn't get an old one, but I know.
I tried to tell you.
You tried to tell me.
I gave you pro tips.
I know.
Insider information.
I know.
I had people from Maytag leaking to me about what you needed to do, and then you ignored it.
Yeah. Well, I did get a Maytag, though.
Yeah, but it's a new one.
At least they stand behind theirs with longer term warranties.
Well, wonderful.
And
you could have had one that you never need a warranty for.
I got one considerably less fancy. So
I suppose that's better.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, man.
I probably
the
should.
Decision-making process might end up being better at the end of this.
We'll see. But just the other day, then I get a call. Oh, your refund for your reimbursement for your dryer was declined because we found the part. What?
Whoa, who are we punching in the
neck? Yeah. I'm like, you guys told me I could go ahead and buy a new dryer. I already have it here.
Yeah.
And using it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to have to escalate this.
Oh, you're going to have to escalate this? Yeah. Don't make me come down there.
So, I'm waiting for a couple days in limbo to find out that, yes, in fact, by them telling me they couldn't get the part and the repair dude not telling me to get the part and that I could go ahead and get the dryer, that, yes, in fact, they were going to reimburse me. But I had to go through this whole process, a whole extra process, having to make calls. They don't make this stuff easy. Home Depot, do better.
Man, insurance is such a friggin' scam. Warranties and insurance, this is what they do.
Yeah.
This is what they do.
And I put out the question, okay, so you're able to find the part. Why is it that after 2 weeks of a guy here not being able to find the part, your people not being able to find the part, how is it now after 2 weeks that it's suddenly available? Where did you get this?
From the Magic Dryer part store?
Right.
Yeah.
From some other dude's dryer who broke down and they had to replace it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that's just it. It was the dryer junkyard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
They found a control board that was slightly charred, just not completely set on
melted.
fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Amazing.
Because that's what I want.
Exactly.
Put that dryer that's going to catch on fire again back in my house, please.
Yeah, fire Schmeier.
Yeah.
Don't worry too much. Yeah. All right, man. My better at life than Skip Bayless this week is once again for SpaceX because I'm doubling down on all you flat earthers and I don't even care. So SpaceX
you
today,
think the
Brandon.
flat earthers are still listening?
They better be. They need some education.
Yeah.
So this is Thursday the 22nd as we record this. And SpaceX today launched off one of their Falcon 9 rockets with a weather satellite for the Spanish government, which is kind of cool in and of itself. Neato. I think it's called Paz. But what's cooler than that is they're sent up 2 experimental, small, teeny tiny satellites for wireless internet that they're going to try to bring to the globe by the mid-2020s. And the whole idea is that you fill the sky with all of these teeny tiny broadband satellites, but in very low Earth orbit. That way
they can crash to the Earth randomly.
Well, yes, when you're ready to get rid of them, yes, you can crash them to the Earth, and now you don't have a bunch of space junk up there. So that is a pretty cool part of it. But the second is the lower you have the orbit, the smaller the lag time is between the satellite and your satellite dish, right, for your internet. Because right now, like for HughesNet, let's say, you can't Skype over HughesNet. There's like a 30-second delay because it's super high Earth orbit these satellites are at, because there's only a couple of them. And so they're way up there to cover a lot of ground. Whereas SpaceX are trying this out with these little guys. So they sent up 2. These are their first experimental ones. They're called 1010A and 1010B. And they're going to start this satellite broadband global network for all of us, say for like when I'm out at the cabin, who has no access to internet out there because it's a rural area. Millions and millions of people in rural areas all over the world that don't have access to broadband satellite. And for bringing that to the people at a low price, because you know SpaceX will, SpaceX better at life than Skip Bayless.
Well, we'll see how laggy they are.
You're laggy. This is great. Don't poop on this.
I'm going to wait to poop on it.
They're going to circle the round globe and give internet to all the people.
Yeah. I was just thinking about the flat earthers today when I was listening to my satellite radio.
Yeah.
Like satellite TV. Like, how does that work if the Earth's not round?
Oh, well, I mean, they're just above the disc part or something.
Well, my disc is pointed significantly up into the sky. Like,
right.
There'd have to be a really tall tower off in the flat Earth distance.
Well, no, they still shoot satellites up. If you're a flat earther, I think they still believe in satellites. They just don't believe that they orbit a globe. Like they just shoot them up there and then look down on the disc as if it was like the top of a CD.
Okay.
I think that's the thought. I don't know.
I don't know either. I'm going to have to look into this. Okay.
And they swirl around above it like it's like they're circling a drain or something.
From the flat Earth research that I did, I was assuming that all of the technology that they were into was all ground based.
Oh, correct. Maybe that's true.
And with satellite, it's just unless there's somewhere to reflect it back to the ground.
Right. Right.
Then I don't know where it's pointing.
I don't know.
No, neither.
Well, one more thing I'm sure they'll come up with some conspiracy about these little tiny internet satellites.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, my better at life this week, the USA women's hockey team for winning the gold and taking down Canada. Adam, I was a little bit bummed. I've been watching the Olympics. I don't know if you've been as dialed into the Olympics as I have.
I never watch the Olympics.
Yeah, well, you're missing out, but
am I?
Maybe.
I didn't know about any of these people before the Olympics. I won't know about any of these people after the Olympics. It's all about the same.
Were you not into the curling? Did you see that the USA took down Canada to go into the medal round?
I have watched precisely 1 hour of Olympics.
And it was curling.
I was having a beer with somebody at Charlie B's in Missoula. And he sat down in front of a TV that happened to have on curling, and it happened to be that match.
Yeah.
And give John Schuster some credit, man. He had some nice tosses.
I just like it when we can beat Canada at something, especially a winter-based sport.
Yeah, suck it, Canada.
Especially hockey, a sport like hockey, which is what they grow up playing.
Right.
And the reason why...
Is that what the women's team did? Did they beat Canada?
They beat Canada.
Suck it, Canada.
Well, I wanted revenge because I was watching the ice dancing skaters a couple nights ago, and one, they were awesome, but it booted out one of our U.S. teams from the medal stand. And so I needed a little bit of payback. And I feel like the USA women's hockey team beating Canada and getting them, they get the silver medal, sure, but they're looking up at us on the podium.
Yeah.
And for that, USA women's hockey team, better at life than Skip Bayless.
Sounds like Canada got what it deserved.
You can have your ice dancing medal. We'll take a hockey medal.
That does sound better, doesn't it?
Sounds a little better.
Yeah.
Although their ice dancing team was pretty awesome.
Sure, if you're into that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I'm not, but it's still
I have a hard enough time dancing on non-slippery surfaces.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. Yeah.
It's impressive.
Doing it on a sheet of ice.
I like watching.
Although this last weekend when I was working, Brandon, I stepped out of the car at the sawmill and it had frozen in Idaho, and I must have stepped on a frozen puddle because it was as glassy smooth as it could possibly be. Like I unbelievably just pure, perfect, slippery ice with like a quarter of an inch of snow, like that kind of dry snow on top of it.
They'll take you down every time.
I have never fallen so hard, so fast in my entire life. Before I could blink, every single arm and leg was going a different direction. I landed on my left shoulder.
Oh, that's exactly what happened to Emily a couple weeks back.
Oh, I feel bad for her, man, because that's tough, dude. Like, that took me down before I could even... as I'm hitting the ground, I was like, did I just slip?
Right. Yeah, she went down hard. We went into urgent care, and she had to get x-rays and... I
didn't do any of that.
Oh, her, what is it, like your CV joint or something like that was jacked up. She still has it. It was 2 or 3 weeks ago. She still hasn't really recovered from it.
Yeah, I don't know. I took a couple aspirin and rubbed some Preparation H on it or something and called it good.
Preparation H?
Is that not what works for that?
Icy hot, maybe?
That? What is the
Preparation H
hot?
is for hemorrhoids, buddy.
Yeah, I don't have those on my shoulder.
No, I hope not.
No, what is it that I'm thinking of then? What is the cream that you put on like an open wound or something, a cut that keeps it from getting infected? It's like a yellow tube with like a green.
Well, maybe you use Preparation H.
No. What's it called? I can't think of it for the life of me.
Neosporin?
Yes.
Okay.
Neosporin. I just rubbed some Neosporin on it.
I like the idea of you rubbing Preparation H on it.
I put it on my lips just in case.
Just in case. And with that,
there's only one thing left to say.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks. Bonk.
That was solid.
Working on my bonk game.
Yeah. You should do that.
I just walk around the mall and catfish. Bonk. 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 Pay for something. Bonk. Yeah. Crushing the bonks.
Yeah, that's the part of the show that most people don't get.
Nope.
And I kind of think it's unfortunate.
Yeah, well, you can always put it in on one of your blooper reels on the end. You know?
Maybe I should put you in at the end bonking every time.
Yeah.
Just so people can see how strong your bonk game is week to week.
See how bonkalicious it is?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm pretty bonktastic. There is no doubt about it. Just listen to this shit. Catfish! Bonk.
Nailed it.
You can't just...
Nobody can do it like that.
No, man. That's 5 years of practice right there.
Exactly.
And dedication to my craft.
Maybe 4 years because we were doing it in person initially. Did you bonk initially? Or was it only when we started doing...
No, it was I had to improvise, adapt, and overcome.
Yeah.
And so that's when we started bonking. I hope people can take the sexual overtones out of that.
That's when we started bonking.
There's your bit for the end right there.